I'm V Candy, and we're looking at Teenaging 101 instructor versus learner scenarios. Hey, Coach, good morning.
Good morning, how are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm very well.
Yes, learner versus instructor scenarios.
Yes, so we're continuing with the series that we started, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I was just reflecting and thinking about the relationship between most parents and their teenagers, or adults and teenagers in general. And then I was reminded of my own relationship and other people's relationship with their instructors, like driver instructors, like when they were learning to drive. So for most people, I know that I'm not going to paint all instructors the same. I'm not going to stereotype, but most of them are very impatient. Most of them love shouting. And
like driving instructors.
Yeah, driving school instructors.
Driving school instructors. What was your experience? Also hit us up with instructors.
So, generally, I'm a person who was introverted. I don't like speaking a lot. And then when I'm in an environment where there's a lot of shouting and all that, I sort of just freeze. Like I'm immobilized. I can't do anything because you're confusing me. Like, what do I do now? You're saying move, park, hey, do this and all that. So it becomes so confusing. And sometimes you feel like, no, I'm too close to like the next car or something like that, and they don't even listen to you. So you know what? Thinking about just that experience and thinking about how teenagers also experience like their first phase of teenage and their parents, I just thought like there are a lot of similarities and there's a lot of things that we can actually learn from it. So most instructors would pretend like they were just born drivers, like they never had their own experiences where they didn't know some things, where they had to be taught. It just feels like, oh, narangu jarwa ndishiziyakudala. And I think sometimes as adults we also have that kind of attitude when we're dealing with teenagers. We make it feel like we were born mature, we were born knowing everything, and we didn't need anybody to teach us. So what we need to understand when it comes to teenaging is that one of the biggest things that happen in that phase is puberty. And puberty is that period where there's a lot of changes, physical, emotional, a lot of changes. And because of that, teenagers are experiencing certain emotions and certain experiences for the first time, and they need patience in teaching them. If we're not patient, then it's going to be like a big problem to them. So I'll just talk about the instructor driver scenarios and how they're related to the teenage experience. So number one, there's this negativity bias, like from most instructors. Just the moment you get in the environment, I've had things like that. And as funny as that may sound to them, like in their clique as instructors, that can be very sensitive. Very sensitive. Yeah. And they just don't care about the emotions, like the emotions of the person that they're talking to. And I feel like sometimes that's how we also treat teenagers. Sometimes we just talk and we're not sensitive to how what we're saying may make them feel.
Anzi V Candy, this tikama futa reminds me of my aunt who asked Ari Kupi. She didn't know what it meant.
Oh yeah, like seriously. Sometimes you don't know, like they just assume that you're supposed to know, but you actually don't know like what it means. And you know what? I'm also reminded of the other experience. The perspective of a driver, like, and the person who's in the passenger seat is different.
So different.
So sometimes the instructor will feel like you are bumping into something, yet you actually know what you're doing, and then they'll just go ahead and
I think I have that problem, like even as a driver when you're being driven sometimes, like when my mom is driving me, even and
sometimes my brakes first and my brakes, you feel like we should just doing that kind of thing. And you know what, the perspectives are very different. So sometimes you're trying to instruct your teenager, yet you're seeing things like differently. How they're seeing it from where they're seated and how you're seeing it is different. But then you're going to go and press those brakes, and you know how it feels. Ukatsikirwa my brake na instructor. You almost bump into the screen because you were not ready for it. You're thinking we're still moving, and then that thing just happens. So sometimes that also happens. Sometimes there are things that are very like safe, like it's the type of thing that every teen is doing, but because you're looking at it from an adult's perspective, you think it's very dangerous because you don't fully understand it. So Novo are hysteric about it, and you're trying to stop them, and they're like, no, it's just like It's nothing. It's not like a big thing at all. But because you're looking at it from an adult's perspective, you end up like panicking, which is another thing which I also want to talk about. Sometimes instructors also panic unnecessarily because they feel like you don't know what you're doing. But maybe you're at a pothole and you're trying to like run away from it, and they're thinking maybe you are. Or you've lost your mind or something, you're trying to bump into something, yet you've actually seen something that they haven't seen.
Okay.
So sometimes that also happens. A teenager actually knows what they're doing. So there's this negativity bias when it comes to teens. We're just assuming that they're inexperienced, therefore they can't know anything. They can't see anything that I can't see as an adult. Yet sometimes there are things that they actually know, and they are on point. And there's nothing that hurts a teenager than to be accused of something that they actually know they didn't do. So they know that, no, I didn't do this. This is what I was not trying to do. And then somebody misreads your intention. That then becomes a problem with the teenager. And then the other thing that I've also learned is there are some very basic but important lessons that you never get to be taught like by your instructors, but they're very essential. You only then discover them whilst you're in the road. I remember like years back. So it was my first time driving alone, and then it was at night, and this was in June. So you know how when it's cold, sometimes mist gets onto your screen.
Yes.
And it's at night, and now you can't see. And then these are things that I'd never been taught. Nobody had said. And now I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? This is at night. You're afraid to park wherever you are because at the same time you want to go but you can't see. So what do I do? And then these are things that have to learn like on your own. So there are things like that also, like when it comes to teenagers, they get into situations nobody has ever had a conversation with them about it, and now they have to do something. They have to make a choice and they don't know what to do. And unfortunately, because most adults are not as accessible, or even when they're accessible, they are very difficult to talk to, they end up asking their fellow friends who may be as inexperienced as they are. They've never experienced this also, and they don't know what to say. But like many people, when you're asked for advice, you don't want to say I don't know. You now want to pretend like you've been there and you're giving advice, and some of the advice at the end of the day will be toxic. So there are a lot of basic things, shakafana nekuchinja, like spare wheel, things like that. These are things that you're not taught but are very important. So even in real life, like when you're dealing with teenagers, there are things you have to be taught but you're never taught. Take dating, for instance. Normally the lessons end at don't date. Yeah. And then when it's now time to date, nothing. I mean, just go ahead, figure out things. Yet there are things that parents have known and have learnt from experience that they could actually pass on to their child who they think is now mature enough to start dating. So there are tips. How do I even choose the right date? What am I looking out for? What are the red flags? What do I do in this situation?
So it's a conversation you need to have with a teenager.
Yeah. Okay. It definitely needs to be done. Sometimes people get abused because they don't know their rights, like even within the relationship, because nobody talk to them about it.
Because a person can speak to you in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You retain your individuality. Just because you're dating somebody doesn't mean they have to control you, how you dress, how you speak. They always have to be with you. They have a right to check your phone anytime. All of those things. If nobody has talk to you about it, you assume and then you go ahead and do. But sometimes we are afraid. We're saying, okay, if I teach my child this at some age, then I'm encouraging them to. But I guess
that's always the conversation with parents, especially those who are very conservative, which is normally the case, in our context, the African context. Green light,
yeah, but that is always necessary, because what then happens is, and a lot of people don't realize it because it happens so fast. So you move from don't date, and then straight from there you're like tagdam kwasha or tagdam road.
You've said it before. It's so funny, but then that's how it is, eh?
So like in between, like what do I do? Like all that thing. Yeah. Hey, yeah. And then still relating to the learner instructor situation or scenario and how it relates to the teenage experience, you realize that when you're learning to drive, you get too many advisors and too many instructors. So your instructor who's at the driving school, and then everyone else who drives at home feels like they can tell you what to do. And sometimes the advice that you get is conflicting. Somebody would say, hey, left things like that. And you end up like getting confused. You don't even know like who to listen to. So that happens with teenagers. When something happens, especially something wrong, every family member who's just older feels they are qualified by reason of age to be an advisor to the teen. They may not even know like the details of the story, but they all come with advices. Kana ma results akabuda, mwana akapasa, everyone comes. It's a programming. That can be confusing to a teen because everyone is just advising you. So it's important sometimes to also just chill and try and understand the teen and not like bombard them with advice from every corner, from every side, because at the end of the day they are confused and they don't even know what to do. And then so having said all of that, now I'll talk about how I think we can improve our relationship with teenagers in instructing them, how we can become like better instructors to the teenagers, because that is important. If we instruct them well, then when it's time to let them go and now they're living their life on their own, they'll remember the lessons and they'll be able to apply them. So these are some of the basic things that we have to consider and then teach teenagers about. So like I've said, puberty is the main thing. So number one, just talk about the physical changes that they are to expect. Your child is 11, 12, they're about to become a teenager. So what physical changes can they anticipate? Can they expect to see? As simple as that is, like I've said, once you have become an instructor, you are assuming that you take things for granted and you think, no, it's not that obvious. You have to then explain these are the changes that are likely going to come. And when these changes come, you're going to attract attention. I mean, boys and girls are going to come around you. They may say things, but this is how you handle that. So when you say that to a child, when the time comes and they're experiencing what you told them to anticipate, they now know how to deal with it. They're like, oh, mom talked about this. Oh, we once had a conversation about this with my dad. So it's easy for them. And then there are basics like hygiene. Okay, that period is coming, so you're going to be sweating more and all. So this is how you do it. Don't wait for an embarrassing situation when they've already gotten into the situation to then try and teach them. It's now different. You know, sometimes, like I said, we may assume, okay, in the Gango Garandiri and hygienic, I was always like that. But it may be that you've actually forgotten. Maybe it came as a result of one embarrassing incident at school where somebody passed a nasty comment to you or laughed at you, and then because of that you went and researched and then you changed. But now that you've been at it for a long time, you feel and assume that you always knew, but you didn't. It was a result of a certain experience that happened. So we shouldn't let our teenagers have negative experiences to learn. We can actually proactively teach them to say, okay, this is what's going to happen and this is what you can do. And then there's something that's important. I think I've mentioned it before. Psychological safety. Just providing a safe space for teenagers to express themselves, knowing that after expressing themselves, they're not going to be victimized for it. So, you know, sometimes you say something and then after saying it, it either turns into a lecture or you end up losing certain privileges because you've opened up. So just providing that that space where they can actually express and tell you what they're going through, tell you how they're feeling. You know, quite often I hear I get calls from parents and they'll tell me that, oh, my son told me that they have a crush, or there are these girls who are chasing after them, and I don't even know what to do. And then I reacted badly, and I'm like, okay, they were just expressing. It doesn't mean because they have a crush they're going to do something bad about it. Because girls are after them, they're going to do something bad about it. It's your opportunity to actually continue the conversation like in a neutral and nice way, and then explain to them that, okay, this is what happens at this point, and this is how you can handle it. So you can do that without shouting. You can do that. Somebody says, okay, mafuta yacho anskwazi, instructor, what is it? Okay, that accelerator and don't look to mafuta. So next time you hear me saying it's a mafuta, I'm saying step on that accelerator. So you can say that in a nice way and a person will still know. But then we share zera and all that, I don't know.
So
it doesn't make the message more effective. It just makes me afraid and I become anxious. So sometimes I end up unintentionally doing what I do not want to do. So I'm actually thinking, I'm a break, yet I'm doing the opposite. So it's just important to cool down and make the environment safe enough for me to ask and say how I'm feeling.
Wow, thank you so much, Coach Tafadzwa. For those who want to reach you and any other information you may want to share.
So my WhatsApp number is 0773 606 728. 0773 606 728. And if you're a parent of a teenager and you want to be part of our WhatsApp groups where we discuss issues pertinent to teenagers, feel free to send in your name and your child's name to that WhatsApp number.
Thank you so much. Teensim.com. We're live. Share this with teenagers. Share this with a parent of a teenager. And always learning. Thank you so much, Coach Tafadzwa. We do this again next week, same time. Check your time with mine, 11 o'clock.